is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Henning Schwinnem, the co-founder and managing partner of Vendux, a US-based company that specializes in connecting businesses with fractional, interim, and full-time sales leaders. After roughly 25 years in global sales leadership, marketing, supply chain, and management roles at companies like Bayer, Innovadex, and UL, Henning saw a gap in the market. Fast-growing companies often need senior sales leadership, but aren't ready for a full-time executive hire. Well, Henning, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And so where are you calling from today?
Calling in from San Luis Obispo in California.
Well, let's start with the origin story of Vendux. Why did you leave a 25-year sales leadership career to build a specialized marketplace for fractional sales leaders?
Well, after 25 years, I felt I wasn't learning anything new anymore. It was the same old problem solving every day. And my goal initially was to become a fractional sales leader. I wanted to be a fractional VP of sales, CRO, felt that I knew enough to be able to help companies who need their sales team restructured, rebuild, build up, solve their problems. And I quickly discovered that I wasn't well connected enough. I didn't know enough founders, owners, CEOs, investors, board members, the people who decide whether to bring in a fractional executive. And I also couldn't find a matchmaker, an agency, a marketplace that had a focus on sales. And so I pivoted and said, I'm just going to build that missing link, that missing matchmaker, and that's what Vendux is.
Well, you use the term sales leadership capital. Can you tell us more about how do you define that? I mean, how do you think about sales leadership as an investable asset for founders, boards, and investors?
Well, one thing that I face in most conversations with business owners about sales is that they think sales are transactional, sales are commission only, sales are paid solely on success fee and are hence, very transactional. But that's not the case. Sales, like any other business function, is something you invest in. You invest in the talent to do it right. You invest in a tech stack to get it right. You invest in a process to get it right. And so investment means you can build up the capital, but you can also lose it, risk it and lose it. And that's how I like to think about sales leadership. And hence we use the phrase the sales leadership capital and building it up within our clients by using fractional executives as the talent that comes in and builds up that capital.
Well, you also have the perfect match system. How does your matching technology work in practice, and what have you learned about it as far as where does it fit in what role, which industry, and how does it impact the culture?
Yeah. Well, we built it specifically for sales leaders. Now it can be adapted to any other function, but it's not industry specific. It really brings together two pieces that they need to be rather detailed in order to create and find that perfect match. So when we onboard executives, we do a detailed onboarding call. It takes about 90 minutes, and we talk to the executive about all the different sales scenarios that they've managed, the type of product that they or their team sold, the length of the sales cycle, the decision makers, the deal structure, and do so for every one of the sales leadership roles that they've held. We talk about the superpowers that they've developed in those roles, the superpowers that made them successful in that role. And all of that enters our database where we keep the executive profile. On the other side, many business owners in our observation know what they want, but they often don't know what they need. And that means they know they want to grow X% a year, but they really don't know how to get there. And so we help them by scoping a fractional assignment around this solution. And that then also identifies what type of experiences and past skills an executive needs to bring to the table in order to be successful in that role. And then we take that scope document and just run it through our software, it matches it against the entire roster of executives, and it gives us back a ranking and a scoring of those executives. And then we reach out to 5 of those executives, introduce between 1 and 3 to the client, and they have the final say, they make the selection. But the perfect match process is this combination of a matching software that we custom build for our purposes and the white glove service on both sides, the onboarding of executives and the scoping of the assignment with the client.
Great. Let's talk about the state of fractional sales leadership. What insights are you finding that you want to share with the audience about what's happening here? Assignment volume, compensation trends, and the like.
Well, it's a young industry, a young role. It's in constant change. So fractional executives have been around 10, maybe 12 years. Fractional CFOs were the first role that got fractionalized. Fractional sales leaders, 7 years, 8 years maybe. And when it started, like a lot of innovation, it started in tech and SaaS. That's where it was first applied. By now, it has found its way into more traditional industries, manufacturing, professional services. And today, the mix is about 50-50 between tech and SaaS on one side and the traditional industries on the other. And I believe in the continuation, it will continue and to change and eventually reflect the makeup of the industries overall in the US. Compensation trends are there. There currently is an oversupply of executives. So there's a little bit of a price pressure on rates. On the other hand, there is a lot of talent out there that doesn't really qualify as a fractional executive. They don't meet the pure definition, which is have that you hold a leadership position in a company reporting to the CEO, leading a major function in an organization. So what that means, for example, on the finance side, there's only one fractional position, and that's the fractional CFO. And in order to call yourself that, you should have held CFO positions before in your career. You can't just be an accountant and call yourself a fractional CFO. And the role needs to be one that's part-time and reporting to the CEO. And if you apply those definitions, then you'll identify what I would call the pure play correct fractional executive. And so that's something that business owners need to look out for. Otherwise, from a trend perspective, it is a growing industry. At this point, only about 15% of all SMBs have used the fractional executive, and therein lies the growth potential. There are 85% of companies left that never used one. So it will continue to grow over the coming years. Hard to say when it will max out, but I expect it to max out in about 5 to 7 years.
How would you peg the current TAM or SAM, total addressable market, for fractional executives these days?
Well, there are 3 million SMBs. So it's 3 million companies, which are the small and medium sized businesses in the B2B space, because most of these fractional executives operate in that space. We're not talking about store managers in brick and mortar stores. So it's a 3 million strong market. 15% have used a fractional executive before, but that also means they have experience and they might use a fractional executive again, potentially in a different role, because depending on what function you cover, there are different windows of opportunity for those executives to come in and be effective. And so that's the overall potential. And at this point, there are about 80, maybe 90,000 pure fractional executives in the US. There are more people who use the phrase, but I exclude those because they don't meet the pure play definition of what is a fractional executive.
And so, how should a company, consider either a fractional or a full-time sales leader? How do they make the choice on that one?
Ideally, they make the choice not because of budgets, but because of what they need, because not always is more better. An example on the sales leadership side is a sales team of 2, 3, 4 reps. That size sales team does not require a full-time sales leader. And so what companies do is they hire the player coach, a person that in part is the sales leader, but on the other hand also has his or her own territory and quota to meet. And that's really a bad role. You're putting two hats on the same person and expect them to excel in both of these roles. And like most people, we're good at one thing, but we're not good at many things. We're not good at multitasking. And so the, a 3, 4 person sales team requires 10, maybe 12 hours a week of pure sales leadership work, which would be, you define the process, you monitor the KPIs, you do one-on-ones with your reps, you do deal coaching. So that role does not require a full-time position. That's the ideal scenario to consider whether you want to bring in a full-time or a fractional person.
Right. Let's talk about impact on revenue. Can you share a case example of how a fractional sales leader changed, the pipeline quality or the win rates or the sales cycle times?
Well, all of the above, right? That's the challenge. The challenges are different. In each assignment that we staff, we look at a different set of challenges. We had a sales team that was successful initially, but between the sales executives and the sales director, they had maxed out. They were plateauing. And the reason was that they had focused on SMBs, on mid-market sales, but now we're targeting enterprise clients. And they had no experience in how to target enterprise clients. And so we brought in an executive that coached the team and the sales leader on how to successfully tackle enterprise sales, and then also helped the sales leader to focus his team and split them between mid-market and enterprise. And within a year, 50% of their sales were coming from the enterprise sellers and from enterprise-based clients. In other scenarios, it's often about replacing founder-led sales efforts where it is the founder selling. And in order for an organization to scale, the founder has to focus on other things, fundraising, expansion, new features in the product, but not selling. Also, many tech founders have never led a sales team. They've never built a sales team. So if you bring in a fractional executive to do that, then you can build on their expertise and create a machine that actually scales. Founders are not typically not good at building a sales machine that scales. And we've brought in executives into what were founder-led sales organizations. And you can measure the impact in percentage growth, but what it really did is it set the company up to scale, right? To not grow more linear, but really scale the hockey stick that they had predicted.
So you mentioned founder-led sales, and most startups start with that. How do you transition from one to the other? Because oftentimes the founder gets good at it and doesn't want to let it go or think other people can do it. But to scale, to your point, you have to. How do you manage that transition?
Yeah. Well, it does start with the founder, him or herself, realizing that they need to let go. In not so perfect scenario is the board realizing it and telling the founder to let go, but the
Okay.
founder doesn't really want it. So ideally, they realize it themselves, and it takes some self-assessment around their strengths. Founders often are good at selling. That is correct. Now they sell as the founder. They come in with an amount of trust, and they come in with the passion and the deep knowledge about how and why this product was built in the first place. And that makes them good salespeople. But good salespeople aren't necessarily good sales leaders. It also doesn't mean that the sales reps that they're hiring can sell the same way that the founder has sold, because that methodology is really unique to a founder. And what a professional sales leader does when he comes in is he assesses and he builds a process, he builds messaging, he builds a tech stack, and then assembles a team that can actually then scale accordingly. And that's know-how and experience that very few founders have.
Well, let's talk about the evolving ecosystem in which we find ourselves. How are marketplaces, alliances, and communities, organizing around this fractional executive category and accepting it and promulgating it?
There is a growing number of companies, organizations out there that make up this ecosystem that exists. The some of the areas that they operate in is the agency matchmaker marketplace segment. There is a segment around education, companies that educate fractional executives on how to excel in that particular role. There are communities out there that bring fractional executives together and provide peer-to-peer exchange and peer-to-peer learning. There are software providers of all kinds out there that are specifically geared towards fractional executives and small consulting outfits. There are healthcare providers. There are brands out there. So there's a whole set of companies out there. There will come a time down the road where there will be some consolidation happening in that space, because there are, in some cases, too many of those organizations out there. But we're probably a few years away from a true consolidation wave. And one of the nice things about the industry overall is that it's an industry that in most cases has an abundance mindset, which means everyone wants to help everybody else. And so there is an industry association that formed about a year and a half ago called the Fractional Leadership Alliance, that brings together these firms, these organizations. And what it allows the association to do is to speak with a much louder voice than one individual company will ever be able to do. I mean, my business, Vendux, we are small, we're young, and if we speak, who listens? No one cares, right? But if we are part of an association, if 20, 30, 40 companies speak with one voice and one message, then that's being heard loud and clear in the industry, and it's being heard by other associations as well.
Well, how can startup investors use fractional sales leadership to, de-risk the go-to-market and protect their portfolio companies?
Well, I think you used the right word. It's de-risking, because a fractional executive is a low risk investment. It's an investment nonetheless, but it's not the same. You're not taking the same risk that you do with a full-time employee, because it's not the level of investment. You're not committing to somebody. You're looking for somebody to solve a particular problem that exists at that growth stage that you're in. So to transition from founder-led to professionally led sales doesn't require a full-time executive. So, the low risk way is to use a fractional executive to do that. To lead a sales team of 3 or 4 doesn't require a full-time sales leader. To establish a sales playbook and a sales process doesn't require a full-time sales leader. Another way to de-risk it is the fact that you don't spend 3 to 6 months on a recruiting process, because what you're looking for is that unicorn that can take you all the way through your growth journey. And so instead of focusing the talent that you're bringing in on the problem at hand that you need to solve in the next 3 to 6 months in order to actually be able to hit that growth curve, you're focusing on bringing somebody in that you think will still be a great fit 2 or 3 years down the road. And I think that's a mistake. De-risking means that you have a chance to bring in the right talent at the right time. And every fractional executive knows that they're there for a certain amount of time, and there are specialists out there, people who say, I'll take the company from 0 to 1 million, another one from 1 to 5, another one from 5 to 10. So you can really focus on that problem that you're facing in the very immediate future, as opposed to the long-term horizon that you typically hire for full time.
Well, what's your advice to founders who are considering, going the fractional route? What do you tell them to do before they kick off that effort?
Well, I think you do want to find the perfect match for your organization. To me, that means you want to understand what's the problem that you want to solve in the very near term future. Find somebody that has solved that same problem before in a very, very similar setting. So if we have a founder in health tech selling a software to small and medium-sized doctors' offices, then we want to find somebody who has done that exact scenario before. And it's not because they have the proverbial Rolodex and they have every doctor on speed dial, but it's because they know how to tackle this segment and they've done it successfully before. That's the kind of person you want to bring in as a fractional executive.
Great.
And when you bring them in and they start on the first day and you're introducing them to the team, you forget that they are fractional, that they're part-time, that they're 1099. They are your sales leader, and you introduce them as such to the team, because that's how you establish their credibility and give them the ability to be successful.
Great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here today, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I feel very confident that anyone listening to this will have gotten a good idea of how to approach a fractional executive assignment. And the idea of fractionalizing leadership functions is one that applies to every role, whether not just the sales leader, every C-suite role in an organization can be fractionalized. And what you're doing is you're avoiding a leadership team where people wear multiple hats and where you're asking them to do things that they're not good at. So it's better to bring in a specialist for each one of the functions and for a specialist for the problem that that function faces at that moment of the growth journey.
Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Well, if you look for my name, Henning Schweenum, on LinkedIn, there is only one. I happen to be unique in that regard. So you can find me there, but you can also get in touch with us through our website, vendux.org.
Great. We'll include your contact details on the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thank you for having me.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.